Darnell Mack here with Stamps by Kate. Say I'm starting another grandmother's flower garden. I love Hexies. This one is out of 3/4-inch Hexies. I've picked out some of my old 1930s reproduction fabrics. I had some scraps left over, and so here I go. So I wanted to do kind of something a little bit more traditional, yellow center, solid with my first layer, and the fun prints on the outside. I don't know what I'm going to do on the next layers or how that's looked, but I got this part planned first. So I'm going to show you how to get started with this. So let me pull this third row out of the way. When you go to start the Hexie flowers, the whole thing is to not cut your thread, to not have to do that. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to cut this, not cut my thread, but get 3 of these first petals on first. So I'm going to do a back stitch, running stitch, back stitch. Move over here and do a back stitch, running stitch, back stitch. I'm going to get these 3 petals on first. Then I'm going to slip these in and sew from here to here, here to here, and then here to here on each one of these opposite sides. That way I never cut this thread here. I just very quickly do the running stitch around, and I'll show you where to stop and start that back stitch, running stitch, back stitch. All right, so I'm not sure. Let me zoom in so that you can see the stitch line and the cutting line and all that good stuff. All right, so I think you can see that. Let me adjust this a bit. I'm not so sure how well the focusing is doing, but we're going to do this. All right, so I've got my center, and I'm going to do it on the yellow side because I think, nope, we're going to do it on gray. All right, so here goes. I'm going to put my straight pin in here, and I check it on the other side so I can see that I can see the silver of the pin here, and on this side they match up good enough. All right, so I go to this first point and I might have too long of a thread. Ha! It's at least 3 feet long. Not good. It should be the length to my elbow. That's the first back stitch, my second back stitch. I pull that really tight, and now I just do my running stitch. Now, when you first start out, don't worry about your stitch length. Just get the fabric together. Notice it gathers up a bit. Pull my thread through, smooth out the ruffles in it, the gathers. There's my first back stitch and my second back stitch. Pull my hexagon out, finger press it out of the way. Now, I still have not cut my thread. It's still connected. So now I'm going to grab my next piece. This is mindless after you do it a few times. I've got my point, my straight pin in there. That's my stopping point. I flip it over and you can see the pucker where it's at. And now I haven't cut my thread. So I'm going to leave myself a little loop right there, if you will. See, it's there. It's tugging on my finger there. That's good enough. There's my first back stitch. Oops, that's what happens when I have too long of thread. And then here is my second back stitch. Okay, now pull that tight because I don't want it to get loose stitches right there. And I do my, oops, my next running stitch. My stitches are not so good tonight, but the fabric is together. Nobody will see it on the other side. First back stitch, second back stitch. Pull it out. Now I'm going to skip this side and I'm going to the next one. Yeah, that's a little off for me. So I use my fingernails to scooch it down Put that straight pin in. There you go. So you can see how it matches back there on the lines, and it's on this side. Now I only pin, when I stamp the fabric, I only do it as dark enough as I can see it. Okay, so see, I've got my little loop. Here's my first back stitch and my second back stitch. Whoops, that's a little loose, so I'm going to take another one. Nobody is going to see this on the when you're all done. I don't want it to come undone. So if it pulls out like that, just take another back stitch. I do my running stitch. I find I actually knocked up against the pin this time. There's my first back stitch and my second back stitch. And now it's tight, and I can cut my thread. And of course I can't get my snips out of my little toolbox there, notions box. Okay, so I pull out my thread, the fabric, and I finger press this, and there you go. I got that now. Now I'm going to put this in here. So again, it's right sides together, and I'm going to do this first seam. So I'm going to put this one here like that. Ooh, I'm not on the camera. Sorry about that, guys. Get this out of the way here. All right. So I'm going to put this one here, and you start right sides together, and I'm going to start on this side. So I'm going to put it right there, and I'm going to shove that seam allowance to the out of my way. Put my straight pin in here, and so look where that pin is. It's right there on the dot. Right there on that point, and the straight pin, you can barely see the silver in there. That's right there by those stitches, and you can see it on this side. So that's the way I want this one to look. So again, you're going to do this stitch, then you're going to go from here to here, get the seam allowance out of the way, and then you're going to go from here to here, and then from here to here without breaking your thread. Okay, so I take my first stitch, I put my thumb over it so I don't pull my thread out. I have not knotted it, but that's up to you. Some people like to knot it. My first back stitch, my second back stitch, I pull it tight. If not, if it pulls out, do another back stitch. You don't want it to come out when you wash it. I do my running stitch. I bump up against my needle, push my needle through. I come up, I don't stitch into the seam allowance. You do not stitch into the seam allowance. So there's my first back stitch and my second back stitch. Okay, it's really tight. You can see how I'm pulling that. Now, I'm going to grab this side, and I want that point to go right here. And I manhandle the fabric, guys. I am not real gentle with this stuff. It's a 2-inch square of fabric. It's not a big deal. At least I try to convince myself that until I run out of that, have that last special piece. All right, so I matched up my points there and there. Now, see how that's tucked in there? I want to get that out of the way because invariably I'll catch it with my needle and thread. So you pull that out, and you can tell I'm pulling it pretty tight, and that stitch is not coming undone. So what that does is gets the fabric out of there, gets that nice tight point. And see, my needle, I should be doing this with red thread, then y'all could see it. But my thread is right here on that seam allowance. You do not stitch in the seam allowance. I take the first stitch, the second back stitch, and now I'm off and running into my running stitch again. Pull it through. First back stitch, second back stitch, whip it around. I'm going to put my needle, straight pin right there. Okay, that's good. So again, this is cupped under, so I'm going to pull it out. Then I finger press it in there so I get that point nice and tight. Now I Push my needle through there. Now my point is perfect on this side. Let's check on the other side. It could go a little bit tighter. So I'm going to scooch it with my fingers, my thumb and forefinger, and we're going to try this again. Okay, that's much better there. You can see it there and there. All right, there's my first back stitch. Remember, do not go into the seam allowance. It'll give you a pucker. I did my 2 back stitch. Now I'm doing my running stitch. Stop up against the straight pin. Get the puckers out. And my second back stitch. Now it's nice and tight. I haven't cut my thread yet. So when you turn this over, look how this works. So I'm going to push all the seam allowances in the same direction. So I make this little circle. Then I thumb press it right there. And so now this one's going to go in the opposite direction. See, when I start pushing those seam allowances in the same direction, that little rosette thingy just kind of pops out and flowers. And then I smash it down. Okay, so that's the first piece. Now, the second piece is the same exact way. I still haven't cut my thread. That's entirely up to you. Sometimes it gets in my way. This one is the same way. I'm going to right sides together. They're here. And I'm going to match up that point. I got the seam allowance out of my way. Flip it over. I'm going to put the pin in. And notice the pin is matching up with the point on that side. And then I begin the process again. Check it on both sides. Make sure it's lined up on the line. First back stitch, second back stitch, running stitch, second back stitch. I go over here, find that matching point, check this side, it's all good. Still puckered there, so I'm going to pull it out, pull it tight, find my needle and thread. Oops, you know what I realized? I didn't cut my thread right there. That was that first step, so I'm just going to snip that thread right there. It's no big deal. My first stitch. Ooh, let me see if I got that lined up right. Yep, good enough. If you don't like it, loosen that thread and scooch it down again. All right. There, I got my back stitch in there. Now I'm going to do my running stitch. First back stitch, second back stitch. Whip it around. Match it up with my straight pin. Check the other side. I'm good. Pull this side out. Make sure it's nice and tight. Notice my seam allowance on both sides are out of the way. I'm not going to stitch into that seam allowance. My first stitch. First back stitch, second back stitch. Now the running stitch. And folks, if you can't rock the needle, it's no big deal. Nobody is going to be looking at this side of your quilt, so do it your way. There's my first back stitch, my second back stitch. All right, I'm going to make sure that that's nice and tight. Oh, look, it is. Okay, good. Otherwise, folks, you just take another back stitch. Nobody will count your back stitches when you're looking at the quilt. All right, I snipped the thread. Oh, I didn't snip that one. Let's snip it. All right, look, I got that next one done. Okay, so let's go do the swirly things on the rosette thingies. All right, that just makes me happy. All right, let's do the last one here. I love this gray and pink. This is fun. It probably wasn't around in the 30s, but I don't care. I think it's pretty. This is my quilt today. You know, I was watching Facebook, doing some stuff on Facebook, and one of the ladies that's bought stamps from Kathleen for years, I think now, her name is Mary, and she was doing this 3/4 inch Hexie quilt, and I just fell in love with that size, I'll admit it, and she inspired me. I've never done one in the 3/4 inch. I've always done the 1 inch Hexies. Every now and then I dabble in the 1/2 inch or the 1/4 inch. But this one I'm going to do probably a couch size quilt in the 3/4 inch Hexies. I know, bit insane. But this is mindless. I love just sitting here with the family, just kind of watching TV and whatnot. And okay, gotta admit, they're watching all kinds of things like Texas Law or Forged in Fire, or I can only handle so much. But I can stitch and sit there and be with them. So that's my first back stitch. So check it on the back side at some point. Make sure you're doing right. I sometimes forget, and I promise you, when you turn it over and look at it on the right side, you are not going to see those little stitches or those little minute imperfections. The ink is not going to show through, so nobody is going to know if you're not sewing on the line, because there is no quilting police. Just get her done. Okay, so it's nice and tight again. So I'm going to take this last one and flip it over here. And take that last stitch with my straight pin, check it on the back side. I'm good. All right, now why is this not playing right? Oh, because my thread's in the way. Okay, so I'm pulling it out. So see how it's nice and tight right there? And I'm basically forming a straight line, guys. So this is what's really cool. There are no Y seams. They're all straight lines. They're just line segments. Okay, take my first stitch, check on the back side. It's nice and tight. You can see the pucker right there. That's that first stitch. This, I don't remember if that was my first back stitch or second, so I'm just going to do another one. Do the running stitch. I am not quite to my straight pin. Now I am. Take my needle out of the way. And my second back stitch. When in doubt, take an extra, I figure. Snip my threads. I got some hangers on there. All right, so now I open it up. And look, I do the same thing and make sure all my seam allowances go the opposite directions. Ah, that's just pretty. Oh, I should get it where you can see it. Look at that. Ha. Turn it to the other side, get the stray little threads out of there. And doesn't it look pretty? Now, if you're on the go and all you're doing is finger pressing, that is all you need. So let's go to the next step. So the next step, I'm going to do these pieces. Every other one. Because again, I want to make the longest stitch that I can without cutting my thread. Now, some people will do it here and do all of these, and that is perfectly fine. It's just a different way of doing it. And so you'll stitch this one on, then this one on. Then when you come back here, right sides together, you're going to go here to here, and then go from here to here, here to here, and here to here. So you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4 seams. And that is perfectly fine to go this direction. 1, 2, 3, 4. For me, I get tired of whipping those around. So I've just done it this direction. And it works out to be the same. So here I'll do 2 seams, 1, 2, and then 1, 2 here. Then I'll come back in and put this one. And then this one is 1, 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. All right, so I'm going to take a break right quick, and there'll be another video coming up as we start on this third row. So, and we'll do a portion of those around, and we'll start with these simple pieces here, and then we'll go back in and fill, and then that'll complete our third row. So I hope you've learned something on this thing. If you have any questions, send me an email at info@bykate.com. You can also find it on our website, www.bykate.com, or on Facebook. Hey, happy stitching, folks. Take care. Bye.